Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, it's important that we get a bit of a voice when it comes to these things. We're actually out there delivering infrastructure, and your brief was quite broad, and hopefully I'll be able to cover some of the questions you've asked in three sections. One, global appetite for investing in Australia in waste infrastructure. Two, our advantages and our disadvantages and complexities. And then the way forward, what we need to see. And thankfully, there's a lot of alignment with what I've heard this morning, which is quite encouraging. So how are we placed as an investment destination? So we're still a great place to invest for a myriad of reasons. We've got political and economic stability. We've got complex investment models, PPP, build, own, operate, transfer. We've got high population growth, particularly in the urban areas. Anyone who's been in the rental market recently will know that there's significant stress on our housing market, and we see a lot of people moving to the cities. And we've got well-developed capital markets, just to name a few. But we're still a very attractive investment destination. What we don't like is we've slipped down the rungs a bit. We're behind the US and the EU. We're sitting third as a global capital destination. Based on a survey that was done last year, 57% of all investments since 2021 have been in the energy sector, which is quite interesting. Obviously, renewables are a big part of that investment. 59% of investors prefer water, and the reason I'm talking about energy and water is obviously we play in wastewater and energy. Stable returns, known technology, clearly investors are attracted to that sort of return. And quite interestingly enough, the interest in EFW as an investment globally has slipped from 44% to 21% since 2023. So you can draw your own parallels to that. Obviously, there's an eye on what's happened in the West, and for the reasons already stated with some of the interviews that were done. Encouragingly, 90% of those surveyed still think it's a great place to invest. No surprise that labour cost is an issue, access to skilled labour is an issue, and then we've heard again over and over today, red and green tape is something that scares global investors. So how do we fit in? We've got a global strategy around investment. We've identified three areas where we will funnel more capital if given the opportunity. Australia, the Middle East, and the US. Australia is primarily focused on strong environmental regulation. We've got increasing waste management needs. We've got economic stability, and obviously that urbanisation rate, which is bringing a lot of volume to feed infrastructure in the metros. Middle East is more around centralised government spending and the fact that there is obviously a strong need for desalination in the Middle East, so it's somewhere where we can offer a service. And the US is more around ageing infrastructure, so big market, ageing infrastructure. Interesting to see how tariffs and the recent moves affect global capital flows, but we'll watch that with great interest, and I'm sure we'll adapt accordingly. So just some of our advantages and challenges, if I can get this thing to work. It's gone. Here we go. Our advantages. So from a local perspective, our resource recovery opportunities are expanding. We're increasing legislative and regulatory certainty. As much as there is still uncertainty in certain jurisdictions, we are seeing that improve. Our ability as a sector to influence decarbonisation. So we want the conversation to move on from simply scope 1, 2, and 3, and we need to start talking about scope 4. Our ability as a sector to influence outcomes for our customers. I think that's probably the next big thing from our perspective is to help with that solution. So obviously strong government support for recovery infrastructure, and EFW momentum does continue, albeit with one eye on what's happened in the West. So just a couple of our practical examples of where we're investing and working with local government and state and federal government. ACT MRF reconstruction or construction is underway. The MRF in Sprayton is open. We've constructed that, and that's already taking waste. We're particularly proud of our Earthshore joint venture in Victoria. This is a practical example of where the levy works. So we've got a hazardous waste landfill that's now being repurposed as a resource recovery precinct. We've got a thermal treatment facility for soil. We'll be opening up a soil washing facility later in the year. Again, hazardous waste landfill now starting to do what we're hoping it will do as far as resource recovery and diverting away from landfill. Earth Power, a long-awaited reopening, and thanks to the local team for putting up some very, very big signs, and we're obviously ready to receive the food organics that's being mandated in New South Wales as soon as it's ready. And then working with both federal and state government, improving our fibre processing capabilities in the West, and converting what is effectively 100,000 tonnes of GO processing into 100,000 tonnes of FOGO processing. So co-investing with both Fed and state government to make that happen, which is, again, particularly proud of that. Some of the challenges in the local market, and again, some of this should be, again, consistent with what we've heard. A full EPC wrap is difficult. You know, getting someone to build a big piece of infrastructure on a fixed price lump sum basis is a particularly challenging piece of work. You can mitigate that by ECI, so obviously getting early contractor involvement and making sure that contractors understand what they're building and the risks associated with that. That's currently where we are with Maryvale, and obviously we're hopeful that that's the next project that does get to financial close. We say there's a lack of experienced EPC delivery teams, particularly in mechanical and electrical locally. They're complex projects. We all know that they're complex projects, so it makes investor appetite a little lower than what we would like. And then there are complex interfaces to manage between O&M, between EPC, between various stakeholders, including, most importantly, the customer. Recycled product, we've heard just how difficult it is to move product. We're obviously tracking this very carefully when it comes to Victoria and New South Wales and what we're proposing for our facilities and what we can actually do with product at the back end. We've spoken about complex regulation and approvals, and the costs are intensive to develop aligned infrastructure. So if there's infrastructure required for product to go to disposal points, that can be very expensive. If you're focusing on the costs, labour market pressure we've spoken about, a reliance on imports for key components is an issue for us. Good to hear just how expensive, or that quantifying how expensive insurance is for us as an industry. It is a significant issue. The last major piece of infrastructure that was lost was the Bedminster up in Cairns, and certainly dealing with the fallout of that as a result of more lithium in the waste stream. Availability of structural components locally is an issue for us, and all of this just leads to increased capital spend and operational costs, which calls into question some of the viability of the infrastructure we want to build. We need to have a look at what's happened in the West. I think it's an important look back for us. Certainly a challenging market for EFW. As one of the pioneers, sort of a decade before Kwinana got environmental approval, you know, getting in front of local government, telling them that this technology was safe, it works. It's been challenging to see, you know, the sort of challenging build and what's happened in the West over the last, 6 or 7 years. I think fundamentally the look back tells us that we shouldn't take 6 or 7 years to build one of these things, and there should be some consideration around spare capacity, because some of the landfill operators in Perth were quite bullish about utilising all of their void in the expectation that ERF would come online, and were left a little short at the back end. So I think the look back's important, and well, hopefully we see those facilities operating well soon. So the way forward, again, should be no surprises with this slide. Certainty of supply and demand for output. Again, we've heard that over and over this morning. It's critical for us as investors to see that in play. We want to see social buy-in. And we need to see existing infrastructure supporting what is critical infrastructure going forward. The infrastructure needs to be required. We heard about the Gold Coast example that landfill space is running out, and there is a strong push to get ERF as the replacement to landfill on the Gold Coast. Consistent policy. Again, I think I'm not the first person to talk about consistent policy. We've had MBTs over the last number of years impacted by emerging contaminants, which certainly has dented investor confidence. So that consistent policy is critical for us to invest. And then, last but not least, balancing the customer's sort of desire and need to see innovation with technology that's proven at scale. So that's a fine balance. There's a fine balance to that. Yes, we want to innovate, but we want to make sure that whatever we do at scale is going to work. What do we need to see from the regulator and government? Again, I think most of this has been covered, right? I'll make my pitch around waste levy and waste levy certainty over an extended period. One of the few times Cleanaway and ourselves agree on things, so we'll take that one on board. Product stewardship, managed to get that in, and obviously effective and mandated is what we'd like to see. Clear and transparent approval processes. We're working hard on Woodlawn and Woodlawn ERF at the moment, and it is a challenging approval process. Last but not least, referencing back into ERF, our plan, in our view of the world, is there's a 5-point plan to make these things a success. Safety first. Make sure that you partner with someone who has deep experience in ERF, who has detailed employer requirements when it comes to what these facilities should do based on learned experiences over many, many years and running a number of these facilities internationally. Delivery partners, there are a number of very, very good and credible delivery partners across Australia and internationally, so pick wisely. Invest wisely, make sure that we're investing for 15, 20, 25 years as opposed to short-term investments, get it up and running, commission, then look to sell. Obviously, waste supply is critical, we all know that. And then, that balanced view to stakeholder engagement. That's the 5-point plan. Thank you for your attention.